has been developing health and safety for caregivers trainings for years. I think the first one that we got was in 2014. And we get these grants from the U.S. Department of Labor, Occupational Safety and Health Administration. And they're about, the reason we love OSHA trainings is because they're focused on the workers. They're not focused on the employers necessarily. They're not focused on the care recipient necessarily, although they're beneficial to both of those parties. What we care about and what our focus is as an organization is on caregivers. As I said before, both family caregivers and paid professional caregivers. So at the same time, even though we develop these kind of trainings and then we go ask for permission from OSHA to approve the materials that we said that we were going to deliver to you. At the same time, they don't endorse what we're doing. They kind of give us leeway to train what we want to train on. So you put in the chat a little bit about yourself. I know you said hello. Can you tell us, we know your names because those are very visible and present up on your screen. Answer this question, how long have you been a caregiver? Or you can answer this other question. Tell us one thing you love about your job. And I'm just going to repeat some of what I see as this comes up on my screen in the chat box. So how long have you been a caregiver, and or what one thing do you love about your job? What I love about my job is working with our elder population in our community, knowing my loved one is safe and able to stay at home. I've never heard it quite put that way, is safe and able to stay at home. That's a nice way to put it. I was a caregiver for 10 years, but now I'm an outreach worker helping out with caregivers here in Zuni. Oh, I'm so glad to have you, Laura. Thanks for coming. As a massage therapist for 25 years, and I love integrating by touch therapy. That's a great way to put it too. Hi, Hermaine. I'm a caregiver for my grandmother. One thing I love is keeping her abled and not so restricted in her home. Thank you, Arlita. What I love about my job is being able to make a difference in their lives. And Marianne Gastia, I haven't met you before. I don't think I've met you before. I work for my mother and for my grandfather as a caregiver. Oh, thank you. Thank you guys so much for that.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt. I can't, I'm on my phone, so sure. I don't know how to do the chat.
So you're doing just fine. So what would you say in answer to that? Use your phone.
I would say I've been a caregiver for about 7 to 8 years now with LIRC.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been recently blessed enough to be able to become my 93-year-old mother's full-time caregiver. And I really do feel blessed to be able to take care of her.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
That's good. You're doing just fine. Use your phone as you need to.
Okay.
All right, we will keep going here. So our learning objectives for today, the next few hours that we have today, you will be able to describe the cycle of infection. I suspect you'll be able to do this at least as well as any nurse that you've ever met. And I think we're pretty proud of this little package that we've put together, and we've made it so that you will be able to do that. You'll accurately be able to describe the modes of infection. You will be able to demonstrate your knowledge of how COVID-19 is transmitted, including some really specific things about COVID-19 that you have never heard on the news, is my guess. And then you'll also be able to demonstrate your knowledge of hepatitis, Ebola, H1N1, avian flu, hantavirus, and tuberculosis. You'll be able to prevent transmission of bloodborne pathogens, including hand washing, personal protective equipment, social distancing, and you'll be able to identify workers' rights and employers' responsibilities. So our agenda is this. You've done the introductions of yourself. We're going to take a pretest in just 1 second. We're going to do some reflecting throughout where you'll kind of connect with one another, share information about yourself and your setting. You'll spend most of this next 45 minutes to an hour on the cycle of infection. We will take a break, and then we'll come back and finish, if we haven't, about the cycle of infection, then go right into personal protective equipment, workers' rights and responsibilities, next steps in worker safety. And then this is where we'll have at the end a conclusion along with a post-test. And in addition to that, a session evaluation. So before we go any further, I'm going to ask Dana, and Dana, I cannot see my notes exactly, as you well know. I think this would be about the right time that I would want you to share the pretest. And Stephanie, the person whose name says Stephanie, tell me your name again.
Stephanie Griego.
Oh, you are Stephanie.
Yes,
Stephanie,
ma'am.
you may not be able to do this pretest on your phone, so don't worry about it. We'll help you with the post-test.
Okay.
You should be able to see this. Sure, you should be able to see this on your phone.
Yes, I see it. I just can't figure out how to send a message.
Okay.
And I'm Christina Stewart. But I was wondering how like I'm on my cell phone too, so I don't know I don't know what I'm doing.
Don't worry about it. We'll Dana, if you're in a spot where you can read the pre-test questions, that might be good. And just so that Christina and Stephanie know what the questions are.
Yeah, of course. If you're using like the Zoom app on your phone and you can see our slides, the questions should pop up for you without having to do anything. As long as you can see when Adrian showed the slides, the questions will appear on your screen as soon as I launch the poll. However, if you called in on a landline or you actually dialed in the phone number, then you will not be able to see the questions. And don't worry about it for those folks that had to call in. We can always, if you'd like to take the test at a later date, I'd be happy to work with you doing that after the class so we can schedule a time. But for folks on using the Zoom app on a smartphone or a tablet or on a computer, you won't have to do anything. Once I hit launch, they will pop up on your screen. It is 9 questions total. So if you don't see all 9 at once, just make sure you scroll past and keep going until you see all 9. It won't let you hit submit until you've answered all 9 questions. So if that's the reason, if it's giving you trouble with that, that might be why, because you have to make sure you answer all 9 questions first before you submit. Okay, it should be on your screen now. I just hit launch. It should have popped up on your screen. Make sure you answer all 9 questions.
And thank you, Rose. Thank you, Rose, for your note. Just as a reminder, if you're on your phone, you won't be penalized for not being able to take this. Go ahead, Dana.
Yeah, so the first question, if anyone wants, like, I'm just gonna read them out loud. If you, if you're taking the test, don't feel free to ignore me so that you don't have to be distracted when you're taking the test. But question number 1 does ask you if you are employed in the workforce, or if you receive a W-2 during tax season. Question number 2, and the rest of the questions 2 through 9 are true or false. So true or false, soil can contain infectious agents that make a person sick. True or false, there are 4 forms of indirect transmission: airborne, vehicle, and vector and motorcycle. Question 4, true or false, a vector is an agent that actively carries the pathogens. Rats, mice, and fleas may serve as vectors. True or false? Question number 5, the COVID-19 infectious agent can live on clothing for up to 5 days and on plastic for up to 20. Question number 6, true or false? Hantaviruses commonly spread to people when in contact with infected rodents or their urine, droppings, or saliva. Question 7, if not treated properly, tuberculosis disease can be fatal. Question 8, vaccination is the most effective way to protect against severe illness or death from COVID-19. In question 9, true or false, employees are responsible for providing a safe and healthy workplace free from recognized hazards likely to cause death or serious and physical harm.
So take your time, 3 to 4 minutes. A good 25% of you have already finished, but we won't rush anyone. Good. About 2/3 of you have completed the pre-test, so the others just keep going. That's great. Let me just show you what you said. Yes, most of you are employed in the workforce and receive a W-2. We have unpaid family caregiver, but everybody on here is a caregiver. Soil can contain infectious agents that make a person sick. 85% of you said that is true. There are 4 forms of indirect transmission. 69% of you said false. 31% said true. A vector is an agent that actively carries the pathogen. Rats, mice, and fleas may all serve as vectors. 85% said true. COVID-19 infectious agent can live on clothing for up to 5 days and on plastic for 20 days. 69% said true, 31% said false. Hantavirus commonly spread to people when in contact with infected rodents or their urine droppings or saliva. 100% of you said that is true. If not treated properly, TB can be fatal. 92% said true. Vaccination is the most effective way to protect against severe illness or death from COVID-19. 100% said true. And employees are responsible for providing a safe and healthy workplace free from recognized hazards likely to cause death or serious harm. 100% of you said true. Thank you for participating in this pretest. We have some training to do. Some of those, many of those were correct. Some of those were not correct, including for 100% of you. So let's keep on going. I'm gonna get us back up here we've now done the agenda. So we'll go right into the risks of your work environments, your home care environment. It is often not under your control, as you well know. Even Stephanie, since you spoke up, even your 93-year-old, I'm suspecting, what did you say, grandmother? If she's living in her own home and not in yours.
No, she lives with me in my home.
Ah, okay.
Yes.
Then she's lucky. She gets to, then that home care environment is under your control.
Yes.
So many caregivers are not in control of the home care environment that they work in. And just the simple fact of working in somebody else's home or even business, even when you go into an office, say if you're working in a home care company, even when you go into the office, there are unexpected hazards. And often those unexpected hazards include unclean living conditions or environments, but they almost always include bloodborne diseases and other infections. So the training we're going to do today has to do with the risks of infection in the home care environment. And our goal is going to be to teach about the cycle of infection and preventing infection. We plan to minimize and even eliminate these kind of risks to your health and safety, meaning to the caregivers' health and safety. So you are knowingly and unknowingly at almost any moment in time exposed to all of these things that can result in infection. And we're going to cover most of the things on this list: COVID-19, hepatitis, Ebola, H1N1, avian flu, hantavirus, and then kind of jump down here to tuberculosis. The rest of these I know you have some knowledge of, if not a good bit of knowledge about. Those won't be covered in this class. So just to get us on the same page, all infections involve a pathogen. A pathogen should be a common word used in your everyday language. And just so we're on the same page, we're going to have a definition here. So a pathogen is a bacterium, it can be a virus, it can be any kind of organism that causes disease. And that word itself is a Greek word in origin. Pathos means suffering, and genus means a producer of. So in the Greek language, the word pathogen means a producer of suffering. And here's the diagram that you're going to know inside out before you finish this class today. And I'm just going to show you a couple of highlights about this chain of infection. If you've ever taken a course like this on a chain of infection, if you see the necklace that I'm wearing, a really common diagram that you might have seen is more like a chain link. that looks more like a necklace. But I want you to be comfortable with a lot of different ways to think about chain of infection. This diagram here just happens to run left to right, but it's still really, really good. Best, I think, we found in terms of the describing a chain of infection. So you have on your left side, you have a reservoir. Those are different examples of reservoir underneath. Then you have your mode of transmission here in the center. And then underneath the mode of transmission in red, you have different examples of mode of transmission. And then on the far right, you have susceptible host. And all these little arrows and circles and magnifying glasses, that's how we're going to spend this next hour. We're going to talk about every little step in this chain of infection. And I'm going to start with this term reservoir. So reservoir, Cochiti Lake Dam, Elephant Butte Dam, Elephant Butte, those are reservoirs. So those are just bodies. And a reservoir is a body in which an agent or a pathogen normally lives, grows, multiplies. A reservoir can be a human reservoir, it can be an animal reservoir, it can even be an environmental reservoir. So if it's a human reservoir, it could be, that would be typical of, say, diseases spread from person to person. If it's an animal reservoir, it might be diseases that are transmitted from animal to animal, and a human might be an incidental host. If it's an environmental reservoir, it could be a plant where the pathogen's living, it could be the soil where the pathogen's living, or it could be the water where a pathogen's living. So a reservoir may or may not be the source from where the agent is transferred to the host, if that makes sense. In other words, if you think about a reservoir as just the place where the pathogen's living and might not be doing anything else. It might not be having babies in there or anything. It's just living in there. So let me go back to this figure 1. So here's a reservoir. And in this case, this is a human reservoir. And this magnifying glass, that's a magnifying glass, I think, showing the gut, is showing what? If you'd like to take yourself off mute. A reservoir could be an animal reservoir, right? This could be a schematic. This could be a schematic down here of, say, maybe that's Elephant Butte itself. And maybe there are pathogens living in Elephant Butte. Okay, so just so you're kind of comfortable with this term, reservoir. The next chain in the portal in the cycle of infection, the next chain is the portal of exit. The portal is a door. So the portal, same in English as in Spanish. The portal is the door by which the pathogen leaves its host. So that pathogen has to go out the door to go somewhere to enter a new host. And the portal usually corresponds to that site where the pathogen lives. In the case of that it's giving on this slide right here, it says the flu virus exits the respiratory tract. So the portal, in the case of a flu virus, is the respiratory tract. It's leaving the door of the respiratory tract. Some pathogens exit or have a portal of exit of, say, like in this case of toxoplasmosis, which you would get from your cat. If you're cleaning up the feces of your cat and you don't wash your hands afterward, and you happen to be a pregnant woman about to have a baby, your baby can get toxoplasmosis because that infectious agent is going to cross the placenta from the mother to the baby. Okay, so the portal of exit in the case of toxoplasmosis is the placenta. Other pathogens might exit or have a portal of exit through cuts in the skin. Cuts in the skin. So the skin itself can serve as a portal of exit. So when you've heard about family, friends, or neighbors who get hepatitis, one of the most common things that you might have heard about is they're getting it from a blood transfusion. Sadly, people get hepatitis by sharing needles if they're drug users. So let's go back for 1 second to this chain of infection diagram. Here's the modes of transmission. And here's some examples of the portal of the exit in the case of, say, I think these are supposed to be two people kissing under the moon. So that portal of exit would be their mouths. So it's going from one mouth to the other mouth. In the case of this person sneezing on the other person, that portal of exit might be, again, the respiratory tract. So this person sneezing, you could call it the mouth, but I would say, more specifically, it would be the respiratory tract. A next step in the chain of infection is the mode of transmission. Mode meaning simply the manner, a manner in which, or the way in which something is transmitted. So the mode of transmission can be direct transmission or indirect transmission. And this is going to get, just a little bit, it's going to sound a little bit, complicated at this point. But so big picture again, here's mode of transmission. And I'm going to talk to you about a couple of direct examples of direct transmission. And then other than direct transmission, there's a couple of examples, even on this diagram, of indirect transmission. So direct transmission is just what it sounds like. It occurs through skin-to-skin contact, kissing, sexual intercourse. It could include, I got a terrible infectious infection last, I think it was summer, direct contact with soil that was harboring infectious agents. So it went from my hand, the soil in my hand, and who knows, I had on gloves even. I even had on gloves. But I know exactly when it happened, and I know what it was. And I remember commenting out loud, oh, this stuff is pretty nasty. And I just went about my day, and I apparently didn't wash my hands thoroughly enough. But that's another example of direct contact, direct contact transmission. And then droplets can also be direct. So in the case of direct transmission due to droplets, that can be direct spraying, in that example, this would be direct contact. So this is a person sneezing or talking onto another person, and it just goes, directly from that person to the next person. So when, and I'll talk to you in just a minute, and just think of that droplet transmission as, direct, because it's happening immediately. The second way that infectious agents can be transmitted is through indirect contact, indirect transmission. And indirect contact refers to the transfer of one pathogen from, say, the reservoir to the host, and there are 3 forms of indirect transmission: airborne, vehicle, and vector. And just big hint, when it comes time to taking your post test, there is no such thing, to my knowledge, as a motorcycle transmission. So that was very much a trick question. Okay. So I just mentioned, big picture here again. So there's vector, vehicle, airborne. These are 3 forms. These are the 3 forms of indirect transmission.
Can you repeat that again?
Yes, I can. Thank you so much. There are 3 forms of indirect transmission: vector, vehicle, and airborne. Vector, vehicle, and airborne. No such thing as motorcycle. So then let's talk about indirect transmission. And it's okay if this hangs you up a little bit. It did me for a very long time. And really, to be truthful, it still does. It still does. But let's go through a few examples, and I think you'll get it. So here's some examples of indirect transmission: airborne, vehicle, vector. Airborne, vehicle, vector. Airborne would be, in the case of, an example would be, and I never knew this, a child might be in a doctor's office, in a pediatrician's office. That child might have measles actively, and then the mother and the child leave the doctor's office, and then a new mother and child come into that doctor's office, and that new little boy catches the measles. In this case, measles is transmitted indirectly as an airborne disease. And the reason that's true is because the virus has stayed suspended. It stayed suspended in the air. So that's a lot different from talking and spraying on someone. In this case, say, the pathogen is just staying suspended in air. These are all forms of indirect transmission, indirect contact. In the case of a vehicle contact, a pathogen is indirectly transmitted, and I like to think of the indirect vehicle as like a handkerchief. If you think of a handkerchief that a sick person has sneezed on or spit on, and then someone else touches it in your household and that person gets sick, the handkerchief is the vehicle, right? And it's being transmitted passively. The infection is being transmitted passively. It's not active. And that's why, it's called a vehicle. So you can be thinking of a car, a car is being run mechanically, but, the car is not the thing giving the disease. The car is getting the disease from one person to the next. Okay. And then thirdly, the third form of indirect contact is vector transmission. So a vector is actively carrying the disease. So in the case of, and all of you answered this right already. So you probably already know this. A vector is going to be probably something living. And the vector could be like a rat, a mouse, a flea that's actually moving that disease from its host to a new host. Let me come back to this diagram. Okay, so you've got mode of transmission. We talked about droplet as being this is direct contact. Direct contact is going to happen from person to person. Kissing, sexually transmitted disease or sexual transmission, or droplet. Breathing on someone, coughing on someone. And then these These three here at the bottom are indirect forms of transmission: vector, vehicle, airborne. Those are all indirect forms of transmission. Airborne being the pathogen is still being suspended in air. The vehicle being, say, the car or a handkerchief that's carrying a pathogen from one host to the next. And a vector, a living agent that's actively carrying that disease from one host to the next. Next step in the chain of infection. And heck, if you can get through mode of transmission, you're almost there. You've almost got it. So the next step in the chain of infection would be the portal or portal of entry. So this is just the reverse case of the portal of exit from that earlier host. And the portal of entry is the manner in which the pathogen enters its new host. So some examples would be through the skin. Hookworm infects people that way. Through mucous membranes, syphilis infects that way. And through blood, hepatitis, HIV, and AIDS. The final step in the chain of infection is the susceptible host. So the susceptibility of the host depends on a lot of different things. It could be genetics, constitutional factors, specific immunity. This would be the reason we're also concerned about COVID-19 and people with chronic conditions. And when you see people talk about or read about susceptible host, this word susceptible is kind of always included in that definition, because if you're a very healthy host, you may not get in the infection. But if you are a potential host with lots of chronic conditions, you might be very susceptible to whatever that pathogen is. Make sense? I so appreciate you sticking with me for that. I'm going to show you a couple of things that I think are pretty fun. One second here. Let's see here. All right. I have this will be another good summary, I think, for
Adrian, right before, real quick, for the
Yeah.
folks that are on the phone and called in, you weren't able to see that video. All you could hear was the music. So I will include that link to the YouTube video when I send out the slides, because I realized there was no audio but the music. So folks, anyone that called in on a landline or dialed in wouldn't have been able to see it.
By the way, excuse me, I just wanted to mention that the video was so fast, I couldn't even take notes, like the chain of the pathogen. So we'll see it again on the YouTube.
I will include the link to the video. Yeah, it's a YouTube video. So when I send out the slides to everyone who attended today, I'll include the link to the video so you can rewatch it if you're interested.
Yes, and I would like to, absorb what it was, but it was like so fast, I couldn't write that fast. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dana. That is really important. And this is, don't feel funny about anything, because this is, to me, this is really complicated stuff. And they teach in nursing school that they spend 2 weeks learning about this. We've only got you for 3 hours. So you're doing great. Let me just throw out a quick little, maybe a mini post test out here. Just speak up as you can. Tell me what you remember about the word pathogen. Just take yourself off mute, or put your answer in the chat. What do you remember about that word pathogen?
I think pathogen mentioned going from the host coming from the host to another person, like a link.
Remember, that word pathogen is that Greek word producer of suffering.
Okay.
So pathos is the suffering. The root word of the word pathogen is suffering.
Okay. Thank you.
Infection.
Yeah. So when you think infection, think pathogen. When you think pathogen, think infection.
I got a great little story about pathogen. If
Please.
it's okay. I was standing in line at the grocery store, and I'm one of the person that likes to wear my mask. Well, this lady, she got in front of me, and this guy went up behind her, and he was coughing, and he had coughed a big old green ookie on her back.
Oh,
And
no.
he wouldn't tell her or nothing. And I had to. But yeah, that's what this reminded me of.
Oh, Christina. And she could have taken it home, and maybe she had a grandbaby at work. Who knows? I mean, at home. Yeah. Oh, that's awful.
I don't mind wearing my mask.
Yeah. That's a good reason to keep wearing your masks.
Yes.
So forever. How bad could that be? Oh, thank you, Galaxy Note 20 and Alva. Yes, pathogen, microorganism causes the disease, something that causes disease.
Disease.
What do you remember about the portal of exit? Give me an example of that.
Tissue or sneezing.
Sneezing,
Sneezing.
that's right. Respiratory tract. A portal of exit might be a cut in your skin.
Mm-hmm.
And the portal of exit is often the mirror image of the portal of entry into the new susceptible host. That could be that could be the infection on the handkerchief that causes the disease in the new host. That could be the cut in the skin. What do you remember about the word reservoir? What is a reservoir?
Just say it. I took it. Oh, we're not on. Oh, storage point.
Storage.
Habitat.
A
Habitat.
A holding tank.
Holding pin, a holding tank, yeah.
Yep. A habitat. Yes, Christina. Yep. And it may or may not be where all these pathogens are growing and dividing and being produced, but it's where they happen to be or where they're living at the time. And it could be where they're being produced.
May or may not be this.
Okay, good. All right. It's 1:55. You've already been with us an hour. I think this would be a good time for about a 15-minute break. How
Okay,
would that be? And just do what you need to do. Don't take yourself off your, I mean, you could take your camera off if you like, but don't disconnect from us. And we will come right back and get started again at 2:10. And Pam will be your next instructor, Pam Stafford. Thank you all.
thank you for your time and information.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye.
These are all the people that could have been. They're all the people.
So I'm going to look for some music to play. And that way, when the music goes off, you know it's time to come back.
Thanks,
Perfect.
Pam.
That's not what I wanted.
be able to hear.
Okay, hopefully we're all coming back now.
Hello.
Hello. I see some faces. I'll wait another beat, make sure everyone's had an opportunity to get back. Okay. Thank you, guys. I hope you had a great break. I hope it was relaxing and that you were able to kind of contemplate some of the great material that Adrian had shared. And I really think that the graphic that Adrian shared was so great in order to help us start to think through some of the diseases that we're going to talk about, some of the ways that those are spread, and then some of the ways that we can stop those or make it less likely that we as caregivers would be get sick from some of those. We learn best, I think, often when we do.
Without beans.
We learn best, I think, a little when we put what we've learned into practice. And so this next section is going to be very interactive, and I hope that you all will join me and come off mute and put information in chat, because what we're basically going to do is go through a list of different diseases. And as we get to the end of the discussion of each of those diseases, there's going to be questions about what is the vector, what is the mode of transmission, what is the exit, what is the entry. And by doing that, by going through that practice, you hopefully will understand the material that Adrian presented in a way that's maybe a less theoretical and more practical. And so that's the point of this. And as Adrian was saying, it's challenging material. I think, as she was saying, they train it to nurses, and it takes weeks, and we have you for 3 hours, but we want you to really feel like you understand. And so we're going to be talking about different diseases and then asking you to apply the knowledge you just learned so that you get used to thinking in of the different types of diseases. Then we're going to move into the prevention efforts. And so we will get there, but the more you understand how it's spread, the more you'll understand why you're wearing gloves, why you're washing your hands, why you're wearing a mask, and it will have a little more impact, hopefully, that way. And so, Adrian, unless you want to say something before we jump in, I will. No? Okay. We will jump in then. And I'm, of course, near the end. Let me go back up here. So we want to begin by talking about pathogens and infectious agents in caregivers' environments. So these are the type of pathogens. Remember from the Greek, the carrier of suffering, basically, that that we might come across in our everyday life. And so we all are familiar with COVID-19. probably if you've been a caregiver for any length of time, you've at least heard of hepatitis A, B, and C. Ebola is, for me, probably the one I'm the least familiar with, but it's something that everyone could come into contact with. H1N1, the avian flu, the hantavirus, which we have quite a bit of in New Mexico, and then tuberculosis. So those are the diseases, the infections that we're going to be talking about. And we're going to start with COVID-19. I know probably everyone's sick to death of hearing about COVID-19, but it is still among us, will be among us for a while to come. And so it is important that we have critical information. And so I think when Adrian had said that there may be some things that you're not really hearing on the news right now, some of that I think is on this slide. The fact that COVID-19 can live on your clothing for up to 2 days. And so if you've come into contact with someone, if you've been exposed, then the clothing that you were wearing could be exposed. It also can live on plastic and metal for up to 7 days.
Wow, that's a lot.
I know that probably what we have all heard is this idea of close contact, and that you are at higher risk the more you are in close contact with someone who has COVID-19. What that means specifically is within 6 feet of an infected person for a total of 15 minutes or more over a 24-hour period. The thing to remember is that doesn't mean you're close to them necessarily for a 15-minute period of time. If in the course of 24 hours, you've had 3 5-minute exposures, then that equals a total of 15 minutes. And so even if you're getting close to provide care and then you're backing away and then you're providing close care and then you're backing away and then you're providing close care again, you could still be in danger if the person has COVID-19. That would still be considered a close contact. But it's also true that the more you are close, if you go over that 15 minutes and you're close for 30 minutes or an hour or 3 hours, then the higher the risk becomes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Delphina Sosi has her hand up.
Oh, yes, Delvina.
I have a question about the COVID-19. How do you know if you're immune to it, or because I know some people are probably immune to it, a lot of them, but how do you know if you are? Because I have a sister that travels everywhere, and she's a truck driver, so from day one, she would tell us she doesn't believe in it. She doesn't wear a mask or anything. She doesn't use like hand sanitizer or anything, and till this day she's fine. Like she's okay. Nothing has ever happened to her, and she says till this day she says it's not real. And I want to know if
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I just wanted to know that. Is there a way you can find out if you're immune to it, or is there a test for her? Because I tell her that she might be immune to it, but she might catch it, but then she can be a spreader too.
Yes, and so it's the ideal of immunity is how much antiviral load you're carrying, which is probably, and if you're carrying that, you're probably carrying it because you've either been sick And so you're maybe immune for a short time afterwards, or because you've been vaccinated and boosted. And so you may, that is supposed to carry with it some immunity. So far, the doctors haven't really identified any natural immunity, any immunity that would occur for a person because of genetics, and not because of either having caught the disease at some point or another, or having been vaccinated. We're still learning, and it's always possible that they'll find that in the future, but we are 2 years in, and so far they haven't determined that. And we also know that you can catch it again, that there are examples of
Yes.
people who have caught it, got it again, right? That the reason why we are having to have boosters, and the reason why we are having to be vaccinated is, more frequently. I've had 4 shots in the last year, is because the immunity over time does wane, and so that's what we know so far. And that if you have some antiviral within you, whether that's because you've had the disease or whether that's because you've been vaccinated or some combination of both, then it's less likely for you to get severely ill. You could still catch it, but it's less likely that you would get hospitalized or that you would die from it. But we know that immunity isn't 100% forever. That's not that's just not the type of disease that this is. You look at our vice president, who has had 4 shots as well, and she's just been diagnosed with COVID, but she's asymptomatic. An asymptomatic person can still spread COVID.
And Pam, I think perhaps the skeptic sister could very well have had it asymptomatic, never know she was sick, and spread it. And that's to me, the biggest risk associated with denial.
Mhm.
So I appreciate, let's go back then. Any other questions about COVID-19 and how it can spread right now? Well, we'll be talking about it a little bit later as well. Okay. So another pathogen potential for infection is hepatitis A, B, and C. And hepatitis is when your liver becomes inflamed. And when the liver is inflamed or damaged, then the liver function is affected. It is most often caused by a virus, and there's different forms of it. So Hep A is usually short-term. Hep B and C can begin as a short-term infection, but can remain with the body to cause long-term infection. And Hep C usually spreads when someone comes into contact with blood from an infected person. And there are vaccines to prevent A and B, but there's not vaccines to prevent hepatitis C. So this is where we begin to put some of the knowledge we learned before break into practice, not as a test, so no test anxiety here, just as a way to get used to kind of thinking about this. So knowing that hepatitis is usually spread through contact from an infected person through their blood, then what do you think is the portal of entry? Which means, how does the the person who's not infected, how did they get the pathogen? How does it injure them?
Needles. Sorry, needles.
Needles would be one way. Yes, absolutely. What else? So that would be your skin. It's that is actually the port of entry. The needle would be the mode of transmission. Cuts, blood, scabs, eyes. And so when we talk about eyes, we're talking really about mucous membranes. And so if you have blood that splashes up into your eyes, then that the point of entry is the mucous membrane, an open wound. Good. Okay. Excellent. I'm sorry, every time I look at the chat, I have to go back and reshare. It's an odd thing. Before I can move forward. Okay. So now let's move to kind of this disease that, as I mentioned before, is the one I'm the least familiar with. It's Ebola. And sometimes being not so familiar with it makes it a little scarier, right? So it was first discovered in 1976 near Ebola River, hence the name, in what is now the Democratic Republic of Congo. And there's been several serious outbreaks in African countries. Scientists don't know where the Ebola virus comes from, but based on similar viruses, they believe that it is animal borne. So infected animals carry the virus, and then they transmit it to other animals, including monkeys and humans. And then once a human has it, then it can be transmitted between humans. So the virus first spreads to people through direct contact with blood, bodily fluids, and tissues of an animal. Then it spreads to other people through direct contact. Virus gets into the body through broken skin or mucous membranes in the eyes, nose, or mouth. And it can persist in body fluids, including semen, even after a person has recovered. So this would be a case where it seems like the person has recovered, but they can still spread the disease. And so let's think about testing our knowledge, putting our information into practice. What are the portals of exit for Ebola?
I think the portals of exit would be like, for example, an animal to a direct contact to a person.
Yeah. So their blood or the animal's skin could be a portal of exit. That's how it could. And how about if it's a person to person?
Broken skin through their mouth, nose, eyes, and through semen.
Yeah. So through direct contact, a person, it leaves the person with their blood, their body fluids, or to other people. Okay. So how are mucous membranes involved in Ebola? And mucous membranes are like your eyes, your they're not the skin, and you're not breathing it in, but they're kind of like soft mucousy areas. Any thoughts of that? Maybe someone different? Oh, I'm not reading the chat. Let me go back to the chat. Yes, I think you will get copies of the slides. I think that Dana is going to send those out. And a spit in the eye would be a good example, Christina, of tears, shaves. Okay.
Sorry, I have a question. Spit in the eye. What does that mean? Somebody talking at you and spitting in your eye?
Yeah, like so they're talking, yeah, like you said, you know, so they're talking and they spit when they talk or something, and they spit in your eye or something.
Yikes. Ah,
My stepmom got hep that way.
really?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So that's not a nice, it's not even a nice expression to think about, is it? Spitting in the eye. So the other one that I am more familiar with, having had H1N1 in 2009, is the H1N1 and the avian flu. And this was first detected in US in April of 2009. It was never previously identified in either animals or people. So it was one of those new novel viruses. And avian bird flu viruses occur naturally among wild aquatic birds worldwide, but they can infect domestic poultry like chickens, turkeys, and other animal species. And the avian flu viruses do not normally infect humans, but they have occurred. So who remembers what the word vector means and can describe how it worked in H1N1?
Rodents.
Still talking about people spitting, but I appreciate that. Yeah, a lot of people, when they talk, they spit a lot. Vector.
I did hear someone who I think had the correct answer, if that person would
An
repeat it.
agent that actively carries the pathogens like rats, mice, fleas.
That's right. Excellent. Okay, and so the vector were the birds that carried to other domestic birds, and then that is how it entered but came into contact with humans. So here is a virus, a pathogen that impacted New Mexico quite a bit and has impacted New Mexico quite a bit and Arizona, specifically really on some of the tribal land, hantavirus. And so, and I think in the pre-test, the answers were really good. So I think probably everyone here knows quite a bit about this. Hantaviruses are family of viruses carried by rats and other rodents around the world. Hantavirus pulmonary syndrome is severe and sometimes fatal. And it's commonly spread to people when in contact with infected rodents or their urine, droppings, or saliva. So the symptoms, this was surprising to me, can start 1 to 8 weeks. 8 weeks seems to me to be a really long time for a gestation period, but then it can start 1 to 8 weeks after contact with an infected rodent or their urine, feces, and saliva. And that people usually do not have a running nose, sore throat, or a rash. They may have a hard time breathing, and when that happens, you should seek medical attention immediately. So what animals causes the hantavirus, carry the hantavirus that cause HPS? Certain mice and rats can spread the infection to people. These are the deer mouse, the white-footed mouse. In my case, I don't know the differences between mice and rats. So I couldn't look at one and say, oh, that's a deer mouse, or that's a white-footed mouse. So I would probably just try to avoid all mice and all rats, since I'm not able to say, oh, that one's okay, that one's safe. It is hard to tell if a mouse or rat is infected with the hantavirus just by looking at it. So you should assume that it could be. And you should avoid all wild rodents and safely clean up rodent urine, droppings, or nests. And in the next section, we're going to talk a little more about that. So let's test our knowledge. What's the vector at work in the hantavirus? And you can come off mute and yell it out if you want.
Mice.
Mice, yes. And what is...
Sorry, white-footed mice?
And yeah, deer mice, white-footed mouse. What is the portal of entry with regard to the hantavirus? We're gonna talk a little more about this in the next slide, but does anybody know how hantavirus enters the body?
The lungs,
that's
like you can breathe it in?
Go ahead,
Mucous
Chris.
membrane.
Mucous membrane is one way.
Bite.
Bite is another way. Good.
Inhale.
Inhaling is a way. Yes, very good. And so how can you interrupt the mode of transmission with regard to the hantavirus?
Use a
Spray
mask.
with bleach. Spray the dust down with bleach.
And use a mask, maybe goggles?
Goggles, rubber gloves.
Yeah, ammonia.
Good. So here we go into transmission. A person can be infected through breathing in the virus. You can see the person sweeping up the droppings, and that's enough if they're infected. A person can touch their face after touching the virus. They can be bit or scratched by a rodent. They can also eat contaminated food. So if you've had rodents who've gotten into your food and you eat it, then that is another way in which it can be spread. We'll talk a little more about how to clean up and block it in the next section. Moving on then to tuberculosis. Tuberculosis is caused by a bacterium called Mycobacterium tuberculosis that typically attacks the lungs. Christina, did you have a question?
Yes, when it comes to TB, my boyfriend, he has tuberculosis, but it went into remission, I guess you could say, like it's a dormant. Like, can that still be spread?
Yeah, I would want to talk to my doctor or for him to talk to his doctor, but I believe it can be. Adrian, do you know more about if it can be spread, if it's in remission or dormant?
I was going to say, I think you gave the perfect answer. And Christine, I would talk to your doctor just as soon as you can.
Yeah, we've been together for 10 years and I have, but they don't really give me too much information. Like,
I think the material that Pam's about to present will show you that it can be.
So tuberculosis is caused by that bacterium. It attacks the lungs, and it can spread through air from person to person through coughing, speaking, or singing. When breathed in, the bacteria can settle in your lungs and it can begin to grow. From there, the bacteria can move through the blood to other parts of the body, such as kidney, spine, and brain. People with TB disease are most likely to spread it to people they spend time with every day, such as family members, friends, and coworkers. And if not treated properly, the disease can be fatal. So what's the portal of exit for tuberculosis? Come off chat if you or come off mute if you want, or if you put it in the chat, maybe someone can read
Probably
those for me.
The mouth, when you cough.
Yeah, you cough, you sing. That's excellent, Shane. And then what's the portal of entry from the other person? The susceptible human.
Same, nose, mouth, maybe a cut.
Yeah, so they're breathing it in probably through their respiratory system, through the mouth or the nose, but possibly a cut. So let's look for a moment then at infectious agents in caregivers' environments. We've talked about COVID-19. How does that spread?
It spreads by being too close to someone that's been subjected to already maybe having it, and it's by sneezing, close contact. Those are the two things I can think of.
living up on plastics and metals for days.
I think the one thing is when you don't wash your hands,
Yes.
like before you eat. I think that's one of the number one things.
Good. All of those are correct answers, and it's the droplets that get onto when a person breathes. The droplets get onto your clothing, or it gets onto metal and surface, and it lives there. So, and then washing your hands, because if you're touching something and now it's on your hands, then you're touching other things.
Can I ask
or your face.
Can I ask a quick question? Hypothetically, if you're in the grocery store, you have your mask on and all that, and someone that has the COVID sneezes on you and gets it on your clothes, you would want to you would still want to be careful because that could stay for 24 hours. So I'm assuming you would immediately want to go home and wash your clothes. So hypothetically, could you still catch it that way?
You can, and that is why the recommendation is that you would get out of those clothes, and you would do it by touching the inside, and take them off that way.
Okay.
Like touch the inside of your shirt rather than the outside of your shirt when you take it off. And so yes, you could catch it. Again, that close contact within 15 minutes, over 24 hours is the most, puts you at most risk, but you can catch it through other ways as well.
That's very useful information because I've always been naive enough to think that you could only breathe it in, or, I didn't know it lingered on your clothes.
Yes, absolutely it can.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then hepatitis A, B, and C. Do we remember how that was passed, transmitted?
Like shaving
Blood.
razors.
Semen.
Ebola?
Ebola. From an animal to a human?
Animal bite, yeah. Mostly rats. Or no, not rats. Rodent.
So they do believe that Ebola might have been passed from animals, but it's the blood that we primarily need to be concerned about with Ebola. And then H1N1 is the vector is the animals, right? It's the birds and the avian flu. Hantavirus, we know that that's mice. I still don't know, having read the slide, especially what mice it is. So let's just say mice. And then tuberculosis is airborne, right? Mostly airborne, through the singing, the breathing, the being close to a person that has tuberculosis. Okay. So what we talked about there was touching, breathing, blood, all being ways in which pathogens are transmitted. Through cuts in the skin, through your mucous membrane, through your respiratory system, through sex sometimes. All of those are ways in which the pathogens get into our bodies. And so we want to reduce our risk. We want to do whatever we can to stop those pathogens from maybe infecting us. So the most effective way to protect against severe illness or death from COVID-19, and I know everyone got 100% on this question in the pretest, get vaccinated and take boosters. That's the most important thing you can do. Doesn't mean you might not still get sick or get the virus, but it's not going to have the same impact as it would if you weren't vaccinated or you didn't have boosters. Employers are responsible for providing a safe and healthy workplace free from recognized hazards likely to cause death or serious physical harm. So I'm going to say that I think employees also have a responsibility, but really the big responsibility, if you're an employee going into a workplace, is that the employer has the responsibility provide a workplace free from recognized hazards, or at least have a plan of action in place in case those hazards are are accompanied as part of your natural job duties. They should have a safety plan. So that plan and the employer workplace plan should include that it would allow you to get the vaccine and boosters as convenient as possible, that the employer provides effective personal protective equipment for your work, which we shorten to say PPE, and that non-essential people are kept out of your work area unless their vaccination status is known. Especially as a caregiver working with vulnerable population, you really want to make sure that non-essential people who have not been vaccinated and therefore are more likely to be symptomatic, even though an asymptomatic person can spread the disease, a person with symptoms who's coughing and sneezing and doing all of that in your vicinity is more likely to be a risky person to be around. And they should also provide testing for COVID-19.
Is the personal protection equipment, is that like a law that they have to provide that?
Yeah, a mask, gloves, yes.
I didn't know that because I've never been supplied with anything like that.
Well, and I'll tell you, since COVID started, there's been a lot of effort to make sure that all people who supervise caregivers have have sufficient PPE. They didn't at first always, but now there's been a lot of effort, and so employers should know how to replenish their supply to be able to get it to their employees.
Okay, thank you.
So your responsibility is to follow the recommended precautions and policies at your workplace. Get tested 3 to 5 days following a known exposure to someone with suspected or confirmed COVID-19. And for the Omicron and also for the new one, the new variant, you should get tested 72 hours after known exposure. If you test, say 24 hours, you can do that. But then if it says negative, then you need to test again. Adrian.
But I asked if Dana's on, she talked about an app on her phone. I don't know how that works. Could she talk about that a little bit for people who might want to do something similar?
Yeah, so I only know for sure an iPhone, but I assume Androids also have this because when I set it on mine, part of the instruction, there were separate instructions for Android phones. But like in my iPhone, there's a setting within the iPhone settings that says you can turn on exposure notifications, which it works with your location system on your phone. So if you keep your phone location on, and it recognizes that you are near someone else's phone who also had their location on and then submitted to the New Mexico State Department of Health, and other departments of health, that they had a positive COVID test, you get a notification telling you that your phone spent at least 15 minutes next to someone else who had reported a positive COVID test and warning you that you were potentially exposed to COVID and asking you to get tested yourself. I think it's a thing that they put in and did in the United States, but I know other countries also enabled that on their cell phones to kind of track and help warn people, especially when you're like in public. You might know that you're exposed to someone, like if someone in your family or if someone you see regularly tells you they have COVID. But this is a way that I guess they've enabled phones to kind of help warn folks that maybe like who are exposed in a public area that you may not know this person, but if your phone was near someone else's phone who reported a positive, then they can warn you that that was,
Is there like a website we can go or an app to download?
for me, with my iPhone, I did not have to download anything. I just had to go to settings and it's actually listed as exposure notifications and I just had to turn it on.
Wow.
I'm not sure how it works for Android users, but for iPhone users, it was not a separate download. It was just a setting that I think in the fall, it was one of the updates to iPhones and it became a setting in your iPhone to turn on. However, I assume it's available to Androids because when I went to follow the instructions of what my next steps were, it did have a separate button for following Android instructions.
So settings and then exposure.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's
You're
very
welcome.
good
Thank you, Dana.
information.
Thank you, Pam.
And so here's a quote from Dr. William Schaffner. It is clear that if you're vaccinated, particularly if you've had a booster, Omicron tends to produce milder infections. One of the ways you can reduce the risk, remember that it's airborne, is to open up your windows in your rooms and your vehicles. If you have a good ventilation system, it's less likely that the virus is going to live in the air. So that is one way to reduce the amount of virus particles. If you must ride in a vehicle with another worker or a patient, open the windows and wear masks. Participate in any training offered by your employer, and whether your employer offered this to you or not, you are here. So congratulations on that. And monitor your health daily and be alert for COVID-19 symptoms, fever, cough, shortness of breath. Wear your mask. I realize that mask mandates have been lifted, but wear your mask in public indoor settings for 14 days after exposure or until you receive a negative test results. So if you get that alert on your phone or whatever, and it says that, or someone tells you, I'm positive, and you know you've been in contact with them, until you can wait that 72 hours and get a negative test result, you should still wear a mask for 14 days. Wear or until you have a negative test result. Wear a disposable mask with a proper fit over your nose and mouth to prevent leaks. If you're wearing it down here, or you're wearing it down here, that is not the way you should be wearing it. Masks should be made of multiple layers of non-woven material and have nose wire, at least 2 layers. And let's review the importance of masks and the proper use. Why do you think we need to wear masks? I actually think you all have given some really good examples. I will be thinking of the green goo on the back of that woman's neck. In the grocery store for a while. So that's a really good visual that helps you to understand. So let's reduce your risk using standard precautions in other ways. Standard precautions are a set of routine practices for avoiding contact with consumers' body fluids. And it helps to prevent or minimize the spread of infections. So we've talked about hand washing. We're going to be talking about it more. Cough and sneeze etiquette. Use of personal protective equipment, PPE. Proper sharps disposal. And keeping your environment clean. And you should use those precautions at every moment in your work. There's never a moment in your work where standard precautions should not be being utilized. So good personal hygiene is a great way to reduce your risk. really doing all the self-care things. If you've been to any of the self-care trainings, hydration and exercise and minimizing the amount of stress that you're holding in your body, the more healthy you are, that all reduces your risk of severe diseases. Wash your hands often and do not touch your eyes, face, or mouth after washing your hands. I find that really challenging. So this reminder is really good. Like someone could remind me every 30 minutes for me to remember that. Do not touch your eyes, face, or mouth after washing your hands. So for hand washing, you want to take off jewelry on your hands and wrists. Or just don't wear jewelry in the first place while you're providing care. You want to turn on warm water. Wet the hands under the running water, pointing your fingertips down. Apply soap. Lather hands well. Rub hands together in a circular motion. The lather is a good chemical to help clean your hand. The circular motion is an action which helps to clean your hands. Wash carefully between your fingers, under your nails, and up your wrists. And can anybody tell me the reason why doctors, and I think there's actually more than one, so a couple of reasons, why doctors and nurses did not keep their fingernails long? And I have to tell you, my niece is a nurse, and when she became a nurse, cutting those fingernails was just painful for her.
It's basically a petri dish for germs.
Yes, absolutely. Things can live under your nails. The other thing is that if your nails are long, you can easily break through gloves, right? And so that's another good reason not to keep your fingernails long. So 20 seconds minimum. I will not make you all sing the birthday song or any song. But when COVID first had, I will say that some of my friends were practicing dialogue from movies for 20 minutes so that they would, because they were sick of the birthday song or the ABC song. Rinse off all of your soap. Make sure your fingerprints or fingertips are pointed down. Dry your hands with a clean paper towel. And then this is important. Use the paper towel to turn off the water and to open up the bathroom door before you drop the towel into the trash. Because otherwise, if there's, for instance, COVID lives on metal some of the time. So if you're turning off the water with your hands, you've just washed your hands, now you're using your bare hands to turn off the water or open up the door, you could reinfect them. And so using the towel is a way to provide that barrier against what may be an infectious site. Putting on gloves. You want to wash and dry your hands carefully before you put on gloves. You want to get a new pair of gloves. You want to pull the gloves on carefully. If it tears or gets a hole, get a new glove. If the gloves have air pockets, interlacing your fingers to remove the wrinkles and air pockets and make sure they're comfortable. And if the risk of contamination is high, you may want to wear 2 pairs. And so I am not going to demonstrate how to put on gloves, but I will demonstrate how to take them off. Imagine I'm wearing 2 gloves. I'm only wearing one. So pinch one of the rubber gloves below the cup using your opposite thumb and index finger. Lift the glove away from the wrist area. Pull the glove off, turning inside out. So now all that contaminated material is inside the the part that I'm touching. Ball that glove tightly into the palm of your glove hand, which would be this one. And then with the ungloved hand, slide your index and middle fingers under the cuff, turning the next one inside out. And then dispose of the gloves in lined trash cans. Wash your hands for 20 seconds. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions about that? Now that we know the way that from Adrian's great description, the way that the mode of transmission occurs, we can really think as we're taking off gloves to be a little more careful and cautious about which part of the glove might have infected material. And so as we're taking them off, to make sure that we're not touching that part of the glove. We had said we would talk about how to clean up a snap trap or a nest, and especially because we know that all mice, I'm going to say, carry the threat of hantavirus. And so put on your gloves. If there's a trap, and the last time we trained this class, I was surprised by the number of caregivers who said that that was part of their job duties, is to empty traps and to even go into like wood piles and find mice and that type of stuff. So in a trap situation, you are wanting to use bleach and water, and you want to soak it for 5 minutes, then pick it up with your glove to dispose of it. And dispose of it in a plastic bag, and then tie the plastic bag, and the plastic bag gets thrown away, and then wash your hands. Any questions about that?
Pam, could I point out, those are pretty heavy gloves. Those look like different than those usual. What do you have any comments on that?
I don't have any comments because I think this is the most gross slide power in the world. Just the concept of it really freaks me out. But I know there's probably people in this room in this training today who have had to do that. So can you come off?
Yes. Hello.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I definitely have had to do it. It struck me that from this slide that those are household, hand washing gloves. I'm sorry, dishwashing gloves. And I think I would throw those away after I did that. I didn't think to put them on when I had to clean out a snap trap at my own house. We had a little bit of a problem here. I think it was last spring, maybe a year ago. And I'm also glad to know about this bleach. Soaking it in bleach for at least 5 minutes. I would not have known that.
Yep. But is there thank you for that, Adrian. Is there anybody else that wants to share?
As a protection, when I've had to do something similar, I actually wear disposable gloves inside the kitchen gloves and deal with, washing and cleaning the kitchen gloves before I take them off, and let them sit in a bleach and water combination, thin down so that it doesn't destroy the rubber. And then after I've taken them off, then peel off my disposable gloves inside in the same way that you demonstrated as an extra precaution.
Thank you. That's good information. So even though your employer is responsible for providing PPE, we know that there's been times when people have had to create their own barriers. And so in that situation, if you don't have PPE, we just want to encourage you to think through what else you may use. And what you are doing is trying to create the physical barrier. So if you don't have a gown to use, you can use ponchos, plastic rain, or trash bags. And as we talked about the clothing earlier, remove the soil clothes or coverings by pulling item away from the neck and shoulders and touching the inside of the item when you take it off. Like normally I may just do this, but instead I'm going to actually lift and pull it off from the inside. And dispose of all single-use items in a sealed bag. Disinfect your shoes before using them in a new setting. Leave shoes out for 72 hours and then wipe with disinfectant. If you don't have eye protection or a face shield, wear goggles from the hardware store. Safety glasses used for yard work or regular eyeglasses that do not impede your vision are okay to use. And can I tell you kind of a story about last Friday, which was one of, it's not the worst windstorm I've ever been in my life, but it's about the worst in that Albuquerque ever had. I think the air quality was beyond the index. It was that bad. And I happened to have been out for a short while during the worst possible time of it. And what was funny is all the people who weren't wearing masks, right? Because we're a lot of people think that we're done with that and there's not a mandate. Suddenly digging around for their masks and asking other people if they had a mask to try and avoid the dust from coming into your mouth. And I thought that was a really interesting kind of, well, you know, if you can breathe in dust, you can still breathe in COVID, but it was interesting to see that. We're supposed to have another wind event tomorrow, and I'm thinking really having some kind of face shield or goggles for your eyes, just because of the dust, makes a lot of sense. If you don't have latex or latex gloves, then use kitchen gloves and dispose of them after use with each client. You can also use garden gloves, but dispose of them after each use. Anybody else?
May I ask what PPE stands for?
Personal protective equipment.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else have any ingenious recommendations of things they've done when they really were needing to protect themselves and didn't have PPE?
You can use a shopping bag as a glove.
Yes. I've done that before too. If I'm picking up something that I don't want to pick up, use a shopping bag or something plastic. Thank you for that. Okay, so we are going to remember vaccination. We are going to remember tests and boosters. We are going to remember personal protective equipment, hand washing, gloves and masks, social distancing, and practices of last resort. And I really want to thank everyone for being interactive. And hopefully it's been a good practice of how to take that great knowledge that Adrian provided and now use it a little more so it becomes second nature and routine to us when we start thinking about how can this disease be spread, so many different diseases, what pathogens are out there, and how can I block those from entering, from the point of entry into my body. And with that said, I'm going to turn it back over to Adrian.
Thank you.
That's
Thank you.
great. Thank you, Pam. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for everybody. We're coming up on the home stretch here. Probably we'll get out a little bit early, maybe 15, 20 minutes left of this entire session. You will get a certificate for the entire 3 hours. And before Before I pick up from where Pam left off, there was a very important slide that I skipped over that I want to be sure we review. And interestingly, I think this came up as part of a question from someone right after we got back from the break, in fact. So a really essential thing about, you remember when COVID-19 was first being talked about, the other term for COVID-19 that people were using even before we had that name for it was, there's a novel coronavirus. Novel, N-O-V-E-L, like in the book you read. That is a word here in this third bullet point. It simply means new. And here is how that pandemic of COVID-19 is different from, say, your regular usual flu, or, you know, the things that we already know about, a regular usual cold. And this is important for you to know, both in terms of COVID-19, but also Ebola, H1N1, possibly hantavirus. I mean, there's a time when all of these pathogens, all of these diseases, we did not know how to treat them. We did not have, say, a vaccine for these. And so anytime there's a global outbreak of a new virus that is very different from any one that we've seen in the past, that's then called a pandemic. And a pandemic happens when you've got a new pathogen, a new infectious agent that has emerged and nobody's ever seen it. So as we know with COVID-19, a new virus can infect people easily, and it spreads very rapidly from person to person. So the other characteristic of a novel virus is that when it's new, very few or no people have any immunity. They're not carrying, like Pam talked about a while ago, a viral load. So, and there is also no vaccine available. So, you know, we all in this whole universe, we developed a rapid vaccination. We had a rapid vaccination response worldwide, but it was still a long time. And it was still a long time for all the people who died and never even got access to that. So in almost every case, a novel virus, a new virus, makes a lot of people sick. Okay, so I just want to be sure that we're, you know, emphasizing a couple of things. And that slide in particular was somewhat central to the, you know, this whole course. What I'm enthusiastic about in this last section is that I heard a question that came up about, oh, is the employer really supposed to be the person who's supposed to provide you all this personal protective equipment, or PPE? And yes, that's why OSHA actually gives us the funding that they give us to develop this training, because, you know, what OSHA cares about, again, is that workers know what their rights are and know what their responsibilities are. And this next section is going to talk about why it's so important that not only are you supposed to know that PPE is supposed to be provided by your employer, but that you then go ask for it. So we'll talk about that here. And just this, there's only 5 slides in section. If you have any specific questions, just take yourself off mute. And I bet if you have the question, then the other person does too. And so this would be a good section in which to just, you know, let me know if you have a question. So this OSHA Act, or Occupational Safety and Health Act, was written in 1970. And here is what it says. It says that every employer is supposed to furnish every employee a place of employment, it's free from recognized hazards that are causing or are likely to cause death or serious physical harm to the employees. We have a few contracted workers at this training today. My guess is that most of you, even if you're a family caregiver to a family member, you are probably being paid by an agency. You're probably being paid by an agency. And if you are likely an employee. And if you're an employee, you have every right to ask for personal protective equipment. You have all of these rights. You have a right to receive the workplace safety and health training in a language that you understand. You have a right to work on machines that are safe. And so, thinking about that, you might not work on a lot of machines. I guess you could consider a mousetrap something of a mechanical device or machine. Well, I wouldn't really know how to answer a question like that if it came up. So let me not use that as an example. When I see machines here, I think what we're talking about would be like in the oil and gas industry, those really, really terrible machines, hydraulic ones that if something went wrong there, you don't have an injury, you're dead. If something like that happens in the oil and gas industry with those big, heavy machines. In the same manner, all these construction jobs that are really dangerous jobs because of ladders or say shabbily constructed scaffolding, that's the kind of machinery that we're really talking about and that OSHA is talking about. You are supposed to receive, go ahead. Did somebody have a question?
No, this is Nikki. I would just that for home care workers, a more immediate example might be that the oxygen equipment of their recipients is properly maintained and safe, and that they've been taught how to deal with it.
Great.
So that there's not fire.
Great example. Thank you, Nikki. If you wanted to go right down to a gate belt, how to use a gate belt so that your care recipient is lifted, moved, and transferred in the appropriate way for him or her, but so that you don't get hurt moving and lifting and transferring someone. You also have the right to be protected from toxic chemicals. Think of just regular and basic, toxic chemicals that might exist in a workplace. What would be an example of, the pressurized gases, hydrogen, oxygen, even those things, like Nikki was talking about. You have the right. Go ahead.
I said bleach.
Bleach, yes. I'm thinking though that would be in almost every home.
And be protected from it in the sense of knowing what it interacts with and how to use it safely so that it doesn't end up putting up fumes.
Absolutely. Such as mixing it with ammonia. Good point. You also have the right to request that OSHA come and do an inspection. We are not every single state has a state OSHA office, but New Mexico has a state OSHA office. I don't know if Arizona does or not, but you can request that OSHA come and inspect your workplace, and you can do that by writing. You can do it by filing through the website, or you can do it through telephone call. You also have the right to report an injury or illness and to get copies of your own medical records that are at your workplace. You also have the right to review records of work-related injuries and illnesses, and to see the results of tests taken to find workplace hazards. So let's move to maybe a little bit of enforcement language that OSHA uses. And this is terminology that I'll introduce to you if you haven't yet been introduced to it, so that you just kind of understand their language and kind of know how to think about it. I talked about in that last slide, you have the right to file a complaint with OSHA. If you think your workplace is unsafe or unhealthy, you have the right to tell your employer without being retaliated against for reporting hazards. Now, in reality, I always kind of roll my eyes at this. We all know about power, and we all know about power in the workplace. And I know the difference almost immediately when I walk in. An agency or an employer that supports its workers and one that doesn't. I know often about employers who would rather us not be in their location teaching safety and health, because maybe they don't want anyone looking under the covers. I suspect that if you were asked to be at this training today, they know, your employer knows exactly what an OSHA training can be, and that they're encouraging you to understand these terms and the terminology, and that they're probably very supportive of your workers and good worker environments. So there's the website if you were to file a complaint with OSHA. You have the right to file that complaint without fear of retaliation. And then if after that you feel like you were retaliated against, so for example, if you were fired for reporting, say, an unsafe condition, you then have access as a next step to file what is called a whistleblower complaint. And all of this information is also on OSHA. And we will send, Dana said she would send the slides tomorrow. And when we do, if you were to click on this OSHA.gov website, you would be able to see, what comes next in terms of, the sequence of events and the process of filing a complaint. To report an emergency, another one of these links that you'll see in the piece that you get tomorrow, is a notice of alleged safety or health hazards by OSHA. Really importantly, OSHA is supposed to and does and will assure you that they keep your identity confidential. One of those questions that's going to show on the post test that Dana's going to put up here in just a minute is, you remember that who's responsible for a safe and healthy workplace in your workplace? And I was at Zuni Pueblo 2 weeks ago. 100% of the participants, learners in that group, just like 100% here today, said that employees are responsible for providing a safe and healthy workplace. And I've got to tell you, that almost makes me tear up, like a couple of other things make me tear up that I think of when caregivers tell us, what's important to them, because I know what you're thinking is that because if you're the caregiver caring for a grandmother, you think it's your job. In fact, it's your job to provide a safe and healthy workplace. If you're working for a company, that company is supposed to be supporting you as a caregiver, you as a worker. So just remember that, those of you who are here as a result of, your employer asking you to be here, even if you're providing care to a family member, you've got to get that support from your employer. And that's the group that's responsible for giving you that personal protective equipment. If you need to ask for disposable gloves, ask for a box of disposable gloves. Make sure you're getting the gloves in the right size for you. Try them on if you're not sure. If you feel like you need a mask to do your work properly, ask for masks. Ask for not one mask, ask for a few masks. Those are relatively easy to get these days, but you don't need to be making some special trip to your pharmacist to ask for that. Your employer should already be offering those to you. Dana, are we ready for the post-test? Dana's going to launch a post-test. We're going to give you all the time you need to take it. And then we'll just go over the answers quickly, verbally, just to make sure that you get everything right. Again, this isn't going to be graded, but my guess is you're going to get 100% on the post-test, and that's what we want.
Yes, so I'm going to be launching the post-test. It's going to look just like the pre-test. It's all the true or false questions are the same questions you took at the beginning on the pre-test. There is a couple questions before those to kind of help me organize and match pre-test to post-test. But like Adrian said, it's not graded. Do your best. We are going to go over the questions afterwards. In a previous class we did, people got confused. We do have one more thing after this, so please just do the pre-test and take post-test, hang out afterwards, and then we do have a session evaluation after. Just because we did have some people get confused last time and left before we did that. But so it should be on your screens now. As I mentioned during the pre-test, you do have to answer all the questions before it'll let you submit. This one has 10 questions because of the two kind of beginning questions to help me organize the tests. But you should have it. Just reiterate, if you called in, like you dialed in and called in on a phone number, don't worry, you don't have access to this. But if you are interested in participating in this, you can email me and I'd be happy to do this with you via email.
Good. Thank you, Dana. So take your time. If you have a question as you're going through it, just take yourself off mute because another person probably has the same question.
Hello, am I still with you guys?
Hi, Tina, you're still with us. If you're with us, you ought to be able to see a post-test. So go ahead and take that as you can. If you're on your phone, you won't be able to, but we'll go over the answers when most folks are done.
Okay, that's fine.
You guys are doing a great job. We're already a third of you have finished. Please keep going. We are not in a hurry. You guys are doing great. 2/3 of you already have finished. Keep on going if you haven't finished.
Yeah, almost done.
Keep going. As you're finishing, I'm going to start going through some of these questions. Soil can contain infectious agents that make a person sick. Is that true or false, you all?
True.
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 True. Exactly. There are 4 forms of indirect transmission: airborne, vehicle, vector, motorcycle. True or false?
False.
True.
False.
False. Which
On
one
a
is?
motorcycle.
Yeah, good. Good. There's no motorcycle. Number 5, a vector is an agent that actively carries the pathogen. Rats, mice, and fleas may all serve as vectors. True or false?
True.
True.
Excellent. 100% of you got that right. COVID infectious agent can live on clothing for up to 5 days and on plastic for up to 20 days. True or false?
False.
False. Yep.
False. So those of you who said false, what are the numbers supposed to be?
Oh.
2 and
7.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Rosemary. Can you repeat that again for everybody? She's on mute. Yeah, 2 and 10. Thank you. Hantavirus commonly spreads from people when in contact with infected rodents or their urine, droppings, or saliva. True or false?
True.
100% of you got this true. I think you got it true on the pretest. I hope you're like crazy over hantavirus like I am now. My husband is almost as crazy as I am about it now too. As we should be. Number 8, if not treated properly, TB can be fatal. True or false?
True.
That's right. That's right. True. Number 9, vaccination is the most effective way to protect against severe illness or death from COVID. True or false?
True.
True.
100% of you got that true. And number 10, the so-called trick question. Employees are responsible for providing a healthy and safe workplace free from recognized hazards likely to cause death or serious physical harm.
Oh, true.
False.
Oh, no, true.
False.
False, because the employers are supposed to do that.
Thank you, Stephanie.
That's
And if your situation is not clear cut, if your situation is not cut and dried, and you happen to have, say, your grandmother in your home, then yes, I'm with you. You know, yours is the safest and the best place, and you're responsible for protecting your grandmother.
Yes.
But if you're working for an employer, that employer is the one who's supposed to be protecting you as a caregiver.
Yes, I am working for an agency, so I learned some new things about pertaining to my rights today, and I appreciate that.
And Stephanie, thank you for sharing that. What are you going to do with that information on, say, Monday? Anything or?
Well, I think I'm going to start wearing gloves more often. And what we have been doing is really isolating because of the COVID. She's going to be 94 this year. We've all had all 4 boosters. So I think starting Monday, I will start wearing gloves, and we don't go out often because I'm afraid my mother will get sick.
Mhm.
And I may ask for one of these belts to help me get her up.
Great. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Dana, what's next?
Thank you all for participating in the post-test. Next is our session evaluation. This one's much shorter. It's only 4 questions. Feel free to be as honest as possible. We don't see names. We won't see names on these, so don't worry. This helps give us feedback so we know what our participants and attendees think of our training. So we really appreciate your honesty. It should be on your screen now. It's only 4 questions.
And Alva, thank you for that important comment that you made earlier. I will share that at our staff meeting.
If you have any additional feedback that you'd like to give us that's not as part of these 4 questions, feel free to send it to us in the chat. If you'd like to keep it private, you can send it to one of us directly. If you don't want to put it in the everyone box, we do appreciate any feedback you have for us on our training today.
Yeah, thank you, Dana. That's really good.
Can I please ask your name? The one that just addressed Dana?
Adrian Smith.
Adrian Smith.
I'll put my email and Dana's in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
Tina, did you have a question? Almost 100% of you have finished the session evaluation. When you do, and if you're done, I just want to thank you so much for coming today. Tell your friends, tell your family, whoever wants to come anytime to any of our trainings, you're welcome at every time. And thank you, Pam. Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Valerie. Thank you, Nikki, and everyone else. Dana, any last closing comments?
I saw someone in the chat say they didn't see the questions. Apologies. Sometimes Zoom does that. But once I launch it, I can't launch it again. So if you didn't see them, don't worry. Sometimes it glitches and doesn't show it to everybody. We're not sure why it does that.
It wouldn't let me answer the last question. But just to let you know.
No worries. It looks like Adrian ended it, and that might be why she may have ended it when you were trying to answer it.
Okay, perfect. And then if we have any comments pertaining to, the 3 of you that have guided us, where would we direct those to?
To either of the 2 that I put in the chat, Adrian R. Smith at AOL or Dana at nmdcc.org. And we can pass those around to the appropriate person.
Adrian R. Smith?
Correct, at AOL.com.
Thank you.
Pam, thank you. Pam put her email in the chat too.
Okay.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Shane. You guys are just great. It's good to see so many of you again. Have a great weekend.
Thank you for your time and information.
Okay.
Take care.